Hi, everybody. I want to take a moment to welcome you to the summit. I'm so excited for everyone to be here. I'm Tara Bradley with the Growth State, and you are part of the Getting from 7 to 8 Figures Summit, where we focus on going from bootstrapping to a strategic CEO. And some of you are probably thinking, well, wait a minute, can I be a strategic CEO with bootstrapping? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. And several of our industry experts have done that. But I do think it takes a mind shift. I think you have to, at some point, say, we did bootstrap, we got there, and now we're scaling. And bootstrapping is how we got here. And when you bootstrap, you do a lot of crazy things to make sure that you don't have someone else diluting your equity. But there comes a point in time where you won't do things that you did when you first started, and you get very strategic about how you use those dollars. So not to imply that bootstrapping and getting there is not the way to grow your business, but I do think there's an evolution when you really switch into strategic CEO if you started in bootstrapping. So excited to have you. We're going to go through a lot of different things, and this particular summit is set up so that you can kind of transition through what I feel is a decent evolution of how you get through scale. First and foremost, I think we've got to kind of take a look at ourselves and say, okay, are we the leaders that we need to be to grow this business? Do we have the right people on our team? Do our teams have the right focus? Are we doing the right things in marketing? Do we have the right sales objectives? Are we going to take on funding? What should that funding look like? So we're going to go through that whole process, and we've got industry experts and leaders that can come in and do that. Many of them are entrepreneurs who have a niche in their particular area where they can really give you some cool advice and expertise. I actually just wrapped up the very last interview just before this, and it was one of my favorites. So I've been equally excited about all of them going into it, and every one of them exceeded my expectations. But I definitely have a few favorites, and you can probably tell as we get through the interviews. So I wanted to start with kind of what I do and what I'm hoping you get out of this summit, which is I'm a seasoned growth executive. I go into companies. Almost always they are looking for an exit. They've gone through the startup phase. They might be clinging to it just a little bit. They're starting to just kind of get into that scale phase with an exit in their future, generally within 3 to 5 years. Some go a little quicker, some go a little bit longer, but that's kind of the sweet spot. And what I almost always find, particularly if it's a founder CEO, is they have gotten there sometimes by sheer will and grit, right? They maybe, they were the first developer, they were the first sales rep, they were the first account manager, and they may or may not have developed their team in a very thoughtful manner. They hired, one or two really, really key superstars that they could afford, particularly if they were bootstrapping. And then they kind of filled in the gaps themselves and then tried to get as much talent as they could afford as they progressed, which is great. We've all done it, right? We've all built that company, but that leaves gaps. And usually they're growing at a fast enough clip, especially now. Things are changing now faster than they ever have in our history, that they don't take the time to really perfect their systems and make sure they have repeatable processes. Because there's a lot of things in your business, as long as you have the right metrics and you have the right leadership in place, you can kind of put it on rinse and repeat as a CEO, and you don't worry about it unless you see a fluctuation in one of those metrics or a leadership change, right? So there's a lot of things that you can say, okay, we have that figured out. Let someone else own it. Let them take it. They're going to report out. We're going to make sure we can inspect what we expect and verify that what we want them doing is correct because we have metrics. And then we can go focus on another piece of the business. That is getting through that evolution of bootstrapping, to strategic CEO. So that is the number one thing, is you've got to kind of evaluate what was that evolution like for you. If you're the founder CEO, if you're a leader who's come in to help the founder CEO, where are you at in terms of your systems, and how tied are you to every single one of those processes. And if you're very tied to them, you got to take a look at it and you got to say, how do I get a system in place that can make me not worry about this? And what's the right leader to take it over? And if I don't have one, where do I go get them? And so the first kind of set of speakers that we have in the summit are going to be focused on kind of evaluating where you're at in the business and determining where are the areas that you've got to really focus. First and foremost, the thing that you have to do is just you have to decide where you're going. You want to start with the end in mind. And you're going to hear a few of our speakers say that you want to start thinking about what are we working toward? Are we working towards an exit? Are we working towards more funding? Are we working to profitability so that we can just run this business and enjoy the fruits of our labor? That's really, really, really important. If you're not sure, I would say focus on profitability. If you're very unclear, it's easy to sell a profitable business. And that's essentially what you're doing when you're getting funding. You're selling at least a piece of the business to someone else. So if you don't know what the end is and you haven't gone through that, just start thinking that I want to do this and I want to get the business profitable. First and foremost, that's the number one thing that you have to do. Secondly, you have to prioritize, sometimes ruthlessly prioritize, and give your team, your clients, everybody that you interact with kind of a North Star. You have to make sure it's crystal clear what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. And I think that people can get really confused and, they say, well, we're client focused or employee focused, or what you really need to be is values focused. You need to know where you're going. You need to know what the end is. And you have to tell people how you're going to get there. And that's where your values come in and how you really want to make sure that the people that are on your team share those same values. Because if you don't, that's when you start to run into issues. One of the really fun conversations that we had through the series was with Kristen Harris. And Kristen had one of the best lines that I had in all of the articles that I read. And she said, don't hire someone that you want to have beers with. Hire someone that you have shared values with. And I thought it was so critical because so many times we talk about hiring for a culture fit when you really want to hire for a value fit. And so we're going to talk about what that means and why it's different. From there, once you've got that defined, you have a really clear roadmap. And the more you work on it, the more you work and build your teams, the clearer it gets. And so then we get into the more minute details. How do you become financially responsible? How do you change your focus fiscally if you've been, an entrepreneur with a really small shop and maybe you feel like it's just you and a couple other people? How do you kind of mature your financial outlook so that you're ready to scale and do those things? Then we get into what's the talent that you need? What's the leadership talent that you need? What's just the team member muscle that you need to get to the next spot? And I think what you're going to hear is that it really depends on what you're great at and what you want to keep doing, who's already on your team and can be grown and cultivated. And then how do you identify where the gaps are and where you want to put your focus first? And it's one of the hardest things to do, I think, for people in this space, because so many times when we're just starting out, we have brought people onto our team just because they believed in our crazy idea, and they might work for free or almost free, right? We couldn't afford to pay them probably what they were worth. We certainly couldn't afford the talent that we really needed. And so we brought people into our teams who are maybe lifelong friends, people we went to school with, family members, people that we've gotten to know through our networking relationships, and they may not be the right fit for the business going forward. That doesn't mean they can't become that, but that can lead to some really hard conversations and changes in your relationships. And so you have to think through those with a lot of intention and making sure that even though you're not making personal decisions, you're not making decisions hopefully based on the person, they are still very personal, and acknowledging that, you could potentially impact somebody's livelihood if you can't figure out how to get them to the next level. It's a huge responsibility. And I know nobody takes it lightly, but those are hard things to navigate. And founder CEOs that have a hard time with conflict, that really care about people and don't like having hard conversations, this is where you can get really tripped up because everything is personal. And you have to make good business decisions and take the person out of it at the beginning when you're evaluating it. You're like, okay, if I take the person out of it, what's the right thing for the business? What do we really need? What's the role? What kind of candidate are we looking for? What's the perfect fit for this? And then how do we prioritize those fit matches? So if we don't get everything, we'll take somebody and then grow them the rest of the way. And if you already have somebody in the role, so you've defined it, you know exactly what you need, and you're evaluating the person that's already there, there's one of, probably 4 things that's going to happen. Number one, they're a great fit, and you're going to be able to push on them and make them part of your really close team that takes the company forward, which is awesome. That's the best place to be. You should still evaluate it, and you should still have a conversation with them about where do they want to be, what's the next step for them, how do they want to be on this journey with you, because it's a huge mistake to leave your top performers alone. It's a mistake I've seen people make over and over and over and over again. They have a top performer, they don't pay attention to them, they give them a ton of work, probably more than they need or can handle realistically, to figure out how to handle it, and then they end up leaving because they're overworked, underappreciated, and probably underpaid for what they're doing. So that's number one. Number two, they don't have the skills that they need right now, but they're very coachable, and they are someone that you could invest in and really spend some time on. Those are awesome people to have on your team. It's very fulfilling for you and them to get them to the next spot. The thing is, you can't have too many of them, because if you do, you can't focus on the rest of the business because you're spending so much time developing people. You only probably, as a founder CEO, an executive leader, 1, maybe 2 of those on your team. If one is a little bit up the learning curve, more than that, you're just going to be so bogged down in the day-to-day, it's going to be hard to move forward. The third kind is they don't have the skill set. They want to do it, but they just don't have the skills, and you're not sure that they can get them. And so you need to, I still think, work with those people. My personal perspective is you've got to really give them some very, very clear objectives to get through, but move them through that quickly, right? Move them through it a lot more quickly than you will with your high potential. And if they're not picking it up and they can't get the basic skill sets, just the minimum set of functionality that you need, you got to quickly help them move to something else. And I do think you have to help them, right? It's not people's fault sometimes that we put them in the wrong role. And so we have a responsibility as business owners and leaders to make that landing as soft as we can and help them move into something else. The fourth kind is the kind that you got to get through quick, because not only are they not the right person, they don't want to be there and they don't have the skill set. And in that case, you just need to have a really frank conversation with them and say, hey, appreciate what you've done so far. It's clear that you don't want to be here and you maybe don't have the skill set that we're looking for. So let me help you find the next thing that's going to get there. So that's a big part of that team kind of dynamic and how you build out your leadership team. I think from there, once you have your leadership team, you really start to pass things off and start working as a unit. And that's where you can build some momentum. And then you can really start to work on your systems and what makes sense and your metrics, digging into your marketing budget. What are other areas that we want to go into? Are there parallel markets that make sense for what we're offering? And so you get through that evolution, and then how do you get creative about your sales? At this point, if you weren't sure what your end game was at the beginning, and you said, okay, I'm just going to focus on getting to profitability, but now you get your team in place, you're finding some really cool opportunities, and you want investment and you want to do those things, and you think that that funding or a financial partner might be something that you want to use down the road, I would start really getting serious about making sure your diligence ready. And what that means is capturing financial documentation, making sure your HR house is in order, making sure that you're just documenting everything that you can, keeping it organized, keeping it updated, because it's a good way to save time and headache for your team when you do get into that spot. But it says a lot about who you are as a leader in a company if you get into diligence and they ask you for things, you're like, yep, here it is. And you can turn it around quickly and it's very organized and it's current and accurate, but that's a given, right? So I would say this is a point where you really, just evaluate. You don't have to shift, but you want to have that evaluation every so often. It's not once a year when you plan strategically. It's something I think you think about every time there's a new opportunity, there's a new team member, there's a new big sale, and you've got some money to play with and to think about how you're going to leverage your business. You want to think about what is your financial positioning. And so this is a great point to do that. Then you start moving into, okay, if this is a place that I want to go and I want to get into financial partnership, what do I need to do to do that really well? And we've got a number of speakers that talk through that. What is diligence like? How do you find the right partner? Should you use a banker? If you do use a banker, what do you want them to do for you? One of the conversations that we had is a concept that I hadn't really thought of in the way that we discuss it. And that's with Jeremy Harbour. When he has a book called Go Do Deals. And he talks about how you can get through transactions as a business owner to bring on the gaps in skills, gaps in offering that you have by acquiring other companies. And you can do it in a way that's mutually beneficial for both of you. You don't have to go out and get funding, and you can really grow revenue very, very quickly because your combined revenue is bigger, right? And so conceptually, it was something that I just hadn't put my mind around or thought much about. But I'll be honest, since we talked about it, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And so I'm hoping that happens for you, that you have something that clicks with you and you're like, ooh, that's a really interesting point. And I've had several. In fact, I just had one earlier today with Patrick Campbell from ProfitWell. We started talking about, oddly enough, he focuses on retention and monetization. This didn't have anything to do with either, really. It was his product support model. And the idea that his product support team actually reports into his product organization as opposed to a client success or an operations role, which I thought was really interesting because there's a lot of benefits, particularly when you're at this size, to doing that, because you can double down and you don't have to get additional resources to be business analysts, and you can maybe short circuit some of the time that your product managers spend calling clients or finding clients to call. They'll already have some of those heavy hitters identified. So I think that you're going to find that as you go through this, there's going to be some aha moments with things that you can definitely take away. I am excited to see how everybody progresses through the program. We will have an online Facebook group as well. If you haven't joined that yet, make sure you do join that. It's on the main page. And if you've registered, we've sent you links for that. And as always, if you want to get some time with me, there is a link that you can do a 30-minute session. And I'm happy to chat through just where you're at in your business and what you might want to focus on next. So I hope that you enjoy the speakers that we have. I hope you find great nuggets that you can take back to your business. And I hope that the whole thing is just a great experience for you, because I know I have certainly enjoyed putting it together, and I don't think you'll be disappointed in the information that you receive over the next couple of weeks. Have a great day, and we'll chat with you soon.